The highlight from Bethesda's conference, of course, and actually it was shown off in the Microsoft conference as well, was Fallout 76.
Yeah.
And this is a game that when I had a lot of trepidation when I first started hearing about it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I had these ideas planted in my head for what this game was. I was thinking for some reason, based on what I was hearing, that it was going to be something more similar to Elder Scrolls Online. Obviously, Elder Scrolls Online is an MMO. It feels like an MMO. I've played it actually in the past couple days
Mm-hmm.
because it was on sale. It's pretty cheap.
Right.
And it was on Game Pass too.
Oh, okay.
So if you have Game Pass, you can play Elder Scrolls Online. I just can't get into an Elder Scrolls game that feels like an MMO. It has that like downgrade in every other way to allow for the performance of playing in these large open worlds that are filled with other players.
Mm-hmm.
And I was assuming that Fallout 76 was going to be closer to that, and we were hearing things like it was going to be sort of like Rust in a way, like it was going to be a survival type game, a lot of rumor, and this press conference and the stuff we learned outside of that really cleared it up and actually reversed my thinking on what it was, which in a positive way, because I was initially pretty hesitant to buy into this game and what they were going for.
Right.
But as details emerged, and then we got this press conference, I am completely on board, dude. Wow, am I excited for this game?
Yeah, it looks tight.
Looks
Looks tight.
super super tight. Like,
And I was not a big Fallout 4 fan. I really like New Vegas. I beat Fallout 3, but I was ultimately disappointed by it. And I felt like I had burned out on Fallout games entirely unless they took like a big step in a new direction. This doesn't feel like a huge step in a new direction per se, but it feels like enough. And I'm like endlessly fascinated by the persistent survival genre. Um, just games where you make lots of measurable physical progress and build up a new, whatever it is you're working towards, especially in like a persistent world with other players. That's super interesting to me.
yeah, absolutely. And so we got a lot of details on what this game is actually going to end up being, and one of those things is that the world itself is persistently online. So it's never going to be not online. You can eventually have private servers, or private matches, or whatever you want to call it, in which you could play with a select group of friends or even solo.
Mm-hmm.
But from day one, when this game releases, it's going to be online only, of course, and you're always going to be in a lobby with other people playing as they intend, because that's what they want the game to be about, is to be in this world where you have to always be considering where the other active players are and either choosing to team up with them or kill them or defend yourself from being killed from them.
Right.
One of the things we learned is that you'll actually be able to see where they are on the map at all times, so you'll always know where the other players are,
Mm-hmm.
which is a lot different than a lot of games in this similar genre where unless you're in a party with them, you're not going to know where they are, right?
How will you know where they are? You'll see them on the map.
You'll actually see them on the map as if you're in a party with
Oh,
them,
huh.
which is interesting because it's a new, I think it's a new thing in this genre to always know where enemies or potential enemies are.
Right. Well,
So
I think it reframes them less as enemies if you know where they are all the time.
true. I guess it gives more incentive to knowing, like, if you look on the map and see if someone is in an area that you were struggling with, maybe you want to run over there and join them and say, hey, jump on chat or whatever, however that's going to work, and say, like, let's do this thing together, bro. We
Right.
got this.
Right.
Um, as for the world itself, very different setting. It takes place not long after the Great War of Fallout has ended.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so one of the things that they hammered home is that it's going to look a lot different than any other Fallout game, because it's so close to after when the bombs fell. Things on Earth haven't completely degraded, so there are forests. There are still not thriving, but they still are alive.
Mm-hmm.
It's gonna be more lush. It's gonna be more green. It's not gonna be as drab and dusty and dark as some of the past Fallout games have been,
Right.
which is, I think, a welcome change for sure.
Yeah, and I feel like a lot of post-apocalyptic games have started to take that turn, and I'm happy about it ultimately.
Yeah, yeah, totally. I think that that's something that's been missing, and I always like when Fallout 4 started to burn out for me. One of the things I wanted to turn to right away were mods that added green to it because I was
Mm-hmm.
so tired of looking at just gray.
Yeah.
And Fallout 4, I think, has moments of beauty hidden in it, but when you add a mod that adds some lushness to it, something to look at, it takes it to a whole another level that is super welcome.
Yeah.
Um, One of the questions that I had about this game right away, knowing that it was going to be this online experience where players can battle each other, perhaps even sneak up on each other and grief them.
Yeah.
The question I had was, what were they going to do to get around that the whole griefing thing? Um, Especially when they showed that you could send these nukes,
Mm-hmm.
which now we know that these nukes that they have that are in end game. Yeah, so once you complete the main story of the game, you'll have to do these really difficult quests in which you can uh, earn nuclear launch codes, and then I haven't figured out if you can bomb anywhere on the map or if it's specific areas, but you can
Right.
essentially nuke an area on the map, and what it does is it irradiates the area, makes all the enemies like essentially legendary enemies, for lack of a better word. It makes that area like a loot heavy, a really like high level area to go and get legendary items, get high level items for your character.
Hmm.
Um, so that's really the incentive that they're going for, and that it's not necessarily a griefing thing. Because as soon as I saw that you could nuke places and settlements, I was like, oh my god, end game is going to be chaotic and a nightmare.
Right.
Um, but they incentivize it in a way that you want to use the nukes on certain areas to obtain high level gear.
I
So
see.
that's really cool.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I've mentioned it yet, but the Fallout lobbies of this game are going to be 24 to 32 players at one time. And this
Okay.
map is supposed to be 4 times bigger than Fallout 4, so that should be plenty enough space for these players to space out.
Yeah, totally.
So I want to ask you, what are you when you think of like what Fallout has been for you in the past, and you've talked a little bit about it already, but what needs to be here to keep you playing this game long term? Like if you're going to invest your money, you specifically, I mean,
Yeah.
if you're going to spend $60 on this game, $65 when it comes out, what do you need there to be to keep you in it? Like do you need to be playing with someone all the time? Are you happy with knowing that you can play solo for a while and perhaps get encounters with other players? What's been missing from Fallout specifically for you that needs to be here to keep you engaged?
I think that the world building has to be super interesting. Um, I effectively the writing needs to be in place. Um, the reason that I dropped off of Fallout 4 was I just was so bored by the writing. None of it was interesting to me. Even Nick Valentine, which people were really excited about, and I'm an enormous noir and pulp like mystery reader. Um, I just couldn't get behind any of the plot points in the game, and I ended up stopping because the combat is just not enough to carry me through a Fallout game. Um, it's uh, everything feels kind of bullet spongy. You have so many resources. I often felt like I was just expending them endlessly in like subway stairwells and stuff like that, uh, in various types of combat stalemates. So I rather than like encountering interesting enemies and stuff, I would like for there to be like interesting stories to find and discover and learn about.
Yeah, that's something they did cover a bit, is that they took note of what people said about the story of Fallout 4 and the style of quests in that game.
Mm-hmm.
One of the major complaints of Fallout 4 was that a lot of the quests were just essentially radiant quests. And what
Mm-hmm.
that means is doing quests for a certain faction in the game that don't have any impact on the story or don't provide any story. They're simply fetch quests.
Yeah.
And that was a bulk of what you did in Fallout 4, mid to
Yeah.
end game. They set up a plot in the first few hours, and then once you join factions in that game, you just run out and do small favors for them, and that's pretty much what the bulk of questing in Fallout 4 is. And they took note of that, and Bethesda said, like, we listened to you, and we're doing something that is more similar to what we've done in the past in terms of dialogue options and the way quests branch out and in terms of like how that's gonna exist in a persistent online world. I'm not sure how it translates. I'm sure they're able to pull it off in some way, but um, that still stands as an unanswered question right now, is how it's going to work from player to player when you're playing in like an online. Because I find like when I play something like Destiny, where I play Destiny pretty much all the way through with someone,
Mm-hmm.
I find myself becoming very detached from the story. And Destiny
Yeah.
probably is a poor example because the story isn't particularly strong in that game.
Right.
But when I'm playing online with someone, I find myself spending more time invested in the experience with the player I'm playing with, rather
Mm-hmm.
than the story that we're both involving ourselves in.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think it's harder to pursue a story in a multiplayer game. I've long been interested in the idea of playing something like Divinity in a multiplayer co-op scenario because it allows for you to do that. But I honestly can't imagine how kludgy and slow that would actually be to have each player have every dialogue experience independent of one another, make all those choices independent of one another, and keep up. Um, so playing like a co-op Fallout New Vegas or something like that, in theory, that sounds really interesting. But like in execution, I imagine that could actually be pretty time consuming. So
Yeah.
I wonder how they'll handle something like that. And yeah, like they have the survival mechanics that they've not really detailed but have alluded to, and the building.
Well,
And
we do know some from the survival in that you need to eat and drink to survive, which
okay,
is, you haven't had to do that on the basic playthroughs of Fallout previously. They do have hardcore modes in which you do need to eat and drink.
right,
Those are optional. But
yeah,
in this game, at every level, you're going to need to eat and drink to survive.
mm-hmm.
So they will have, I'm assuming, your stamina be affected and your health ultimately affected by not eating and drinking.
Yeah,
Food is going to degrade over time. It's actually going to rot. So we see that in a lot of other survival games.
mm-hmm.
So you'll need to be mindful of that, and perhaps in your base building, as you were mentioning, you'll be able to build like some sort of refrigeration to keep food longer, storage to keep food longer. Um, in
So
the
that
base
kind of
building,
thing,
go ahead.
well, that kind of thing is what makes the survival elements bring the co-op experience a new depth that extends beyond simply like shooting at the same enemy at the same time. Like, hey, dude, like you gotta need food. My character's starving, or sharing resources ultimately
Exactly. Yeah,
is
totally.
interesting.
Yeah, you might, like, if you're in a group of four, like you might want to have one person that specs out, like, because how leveling is going to work in this game is you're gonna, with each level, be able to choose a perk card,
Mm-hmm.
and these perk cards are going to give you different attributes and things, all related to your strength, perception. So if you're familiar with Fallout, you'll know how that works. And each of these perk cards give you bonuses for various things, cooking, combat, stuff like that. So you can spec your character out in a way that is beneficial for a certain type of playthrough. Like if you want to focus on support, you can perk yourself out that way.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the really fucking cool things is that once you collect your perk cards by leveling up, you can actually give them to other players.
Oh.
So like how that works is, if you're in a group with someone and you're doing a quest, or you're just like, hanging out with them, you can let them use your perk card if you're not using it, because you only have a certain number of these perk card slots.
Oh.
So say by level 50 you have 50 perk cards. At
Mm-hmm.
any given time you only be able to use a certain amount of those.
Right.
And from what I understand, you'll be able to not gift them permanently, but let someone in your party use a perk card if you're not using it.
Huh. Okay. Yeah. Well, that's cool. Yeah. Sharing resources and co-op experiences is always fun. Also, like, it encourages communication, which I really like. So.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Some other notable things that is going to be included. They're going to have a anti-griefing measure in place, similar to how Grand Theft Auto works, GTA Online, in which if you're constantly killing other players, you'll gain like a wanted level, sort of
Mm-hmm.
how they have bounties put on
Mm-hmm.
players for who are causing a lot of damage, or killing a lot of players. Um, and the penalty for dying in the game is that you'll respawn nearby, just like GTA. Um,
So, so I'm, like I said, I'm fascinated by the idea of persistent survival games. The idea of something like Ark or Rust interests me very deeply. I tried my hand at DayZ when that was popular, put like 30 hours into that game. Um, but ultimately, even in spite of how those games are meant to be played, they are invariably exploited by their fan bases, and the means for griefing are invariably uncovered. And there is no measure strong enough to stop people from being assholes in those games. And the GTA uh, griefing measures are not strong. You and I
no,
exploited them ourselves.
yeah,
The respawning the character further away isn't far enough.
it's
We
not far enough, dude.
I will always recount the experience of you and I personally hunting somebody who shot at us
Uh huh.
across the southern part of GTA 5's map down to a beach, repeatedly killing him and spawning a little bit further away, down to a beach where he eventually could only spawn in the same point because
Yeah,
the AI couldn't find anywhere new to put him, and we just took pictures over his body until
oh
he
my,
quit out of the map.
I remember that. That's fucking terrible,
It's
dude.
terrible,
Yeah.
and like I had a lot of fun doing that, but also like I hate when people do that shit to me.
Oh man, yeah, it's not a good feeling, and you're right. I mean, inevitably you'll experience something in this game that frustrates you because you're getting spawn trapped somehow. There'll be something that you'll experience, but I think that Bethesda is doing everything in their power to incentivize teamwork in this game.
Well, okay, yes, but also uh, incentivization of teamwork isn't enough. Like, but I think it's presumptuous to assert that players are going to play the way that developers want them to, because that always falls through. Develop Players always find different ways to play. They Developers will tell you this. Developers are surprised by the things that players end up finding to do in their games, and this isn't a complaint. Like, the creativity of players is unparalleled, but we can't assume that players are going to play nice. They're just not going to do that. And
Can't get boxed in.
nah, so well, I mean, we'll see, but I am still hesitant about the persistent survival model and how people are going to behave in that, because really, like, the idea of playing a Rust populated by like ravenous Fallout fanboys is sounds like a fucking nightmare to me. And
Hmm.
I want to see also, like, this is Bethesda's first, outside of Elder Scrolls Online, this is their first like multiplayer experience at this degree.
Oh, absolutely.
So, nobody exceeds at their first try. So I am hesitantly um, excited I think it sounds really cool. I just hope
Yeah,
people play it, quote, right.
right, the right way. I think that this would be, if this was a game that right from day one I could just play with you or play
Mm-hmm.
with, a small group of people and that was
Mm-hmm.
it, I would be 100% on board. And to be honest, after this press conference and reading everything that's out now about this game, I'm probably going to get this as soon as it comes out,
Yeah.
regardless. But would knowing that you could have that experience of just playing in a small group of people, whether it was just with me or a few other people, would that incentivize you more to pick this up right away?
Okay, so like I am expressing hesitation, but make no mistake, like I am interested in playing this game.
Right.
I also recognize that my willingness to continually throw myself into the gears of these persistent survival sims is foolish, considering how they continue to betray me. But I do believe that there is the kernel of something great in this gameplay model. I just want to see it executed on in a way that doesn't somehow manage to reward shitheads.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that the size of the map, coupled with the small scale of the player base on that map, is a good. Is a very strong means of minimizing the likelihood of incentivizing people being assholes, because you're really going to have to go out of your way to hunt people down if we're to understand how large this map is supposed to be. Um, so yeah, I'm totally going to play this game. Like I'm I'm going to play this game.
Good. Hell
Yeah.
yeah! I need some people to play with.